Welcome to Book Review Writing. I am Justin Rempel. So we need to talk about what is a book review. A book review is a written response to a book. It's a very particular type of writing, and there's a certain format that reviews need to take. There are three major components to a book review. I like to use the acronym SAP to remember them. SAP, SAP. Summary, analysis, and personal response are the three parts. SAP, SAP. I just have a little side note here that you might hear book review, you might hear book report. A report generally has more focus on the summary part, just focusing on what happens in the book. A review focuses a bit more on the personal response, your opinions of the book. But often you just hear those terms interchangeably. Report, review, people use them to kind of mean the same thing. Step one, read the book. Do not write a review of a book you have not read or have only partially read. A lot of people try to do this. They look up online reviews or excerpts. They read the first chapter and the last chapter. If you are assigned a book review, you are expected to read the entire book front to back. Please make sure you do so before you start writing your review. Now, if you know that you're writing a review for a book, you are going to want to start making notes while you read. This means you're paying attention to plot points. You might be jotting those down on a piece of note paper. That's to help you with your summary down the road. You're going to pay attention to strengths and weaknesses, things you think the writer of the book does very well and things you think they might not. That's going to help you with your analysis in your final review. And you're paying attention to likes and dislikes. You might be making notes of that as well. And that's going to help you with your personal response. It's a good idea when you're making notes to keep track of page numbers. Some people like to use sticky notes as bookmarks and make notes that way as they read, just sticking the sticky notes into whatever page the note is for. And some people like to work on an entirely separate piece of paper. So use whatever works best for you. Step two, write the review. Once you have actually finished the book, you are ready to write your review. We experience and encounter reviews in all sorts of forms, and with the internet, we encounter them more than ever. So especially online in comments and posts, there's a lot of really informal reviews, people sharing their opinions of books and movies and all sorts of things. And these use really casual language, and that's fine for those platforms. When you have a review as an assignment, or you're writing it for a publication or for an employer, these are formal reviews. They're professional. We write them in full sentences and paragraphs. We use correct conventions, grammar, spelling, punctuation. Very important. Again, we've got three major components that we're going to be focusing on: SAP, summary, analysis, personal response. In that order, let's take a closer look. So step one, or part one of your book review, is going to be a summary. The very first thing that you need to state when you're writing your book review is the basic book information. You want to say who the author is and what the title is. You are assuming that your reader has not read the book. They know nothing. So they need to be introduced to what book you're talking about first. You might want to include other basic pieces of information like the year of publication. Sometimes it's significant to know what era or time period this book came out in. Is it a very recent book? Is it 10 years old? Is it 50 years old? Is it 200 years old? Makes a big difference. You might want to include the genre. What type of book is it? Mystery, horror, suspense, action, romance. That's a very basic piece of information that it's good to know right off the hop. When you launch into your summary, you need to know what a summary is. A summary is a brief recap of the plot, which is what actually happens in the story. So we're not getting into analysis and making commentary about things that are good or bad. We're not getting into our opinions, things that we liked or disliked yet. That all happens later. For now, we are just stating what happens in the book. The best place to start is saying what the setting is. That's time and place that the story happens, and letting the reader know who the main characters are. Again, the assumption is that your reader knows nothing. So they need to know the names of the main characters. They need to know when and where this story takes place. As you move through your summary, you are only explaining the major plot points or story events that occur. You're not including any extra details or non-essential information. Just major events. First this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Of course, you're probably going to want to say it with a little bit more sentence variety than that. Part 2, analysis. Once you've completed your summary, you're going to move on to the second section. Your summary might take a few paragraphs. For sure, the analysis is going to start in a new paragraph because it's a completely different section of the review. An analysis is a thoughtful breakdown of the story's techniques. And a good review is going to highlight both strengths, things the story does very, very well, and weaknesses, things that the story does not do such a good job at of the work. Some important elements to consider. Okay, so when you're thinking about strengths and weaknesses, what it does well, you're going to think about the components of storytelling and whether this book succeeds at those. So you want to think about the plot. How is the pacing of the plot? Is it really slow? Is it really fast? You want to think about the development, the complexity of the plot, how complicated it is, lots of moving parts, or very simple and straightforward. Is it linear? That means the story happens in chronological order. Or does it jump around in time a whole bunch? Non-linear. You want to think about the conflict. Are there compelling conflicts in the plot? Does it lack conflict? Are the conflicts believable? Okay. The second component you really want to think about is characters. Are they well developed? Do we see growth in the characters from start to finish in the story? Are these realistic characters? Are they believable? Or are they pretty shallow and superficial, kind of one note? What are the characters' motivations? Do they have believable drives for their decision makings? Do we understand why they're making the decisions they do? Or do they seem to just do things randomly for no apparent reason? Okay, these are the differences between good, well-written characters and poorly written characters. The third component we really want to think about is the language, the actual words that the author is using. What kind of voice does the author have? Does their personality really come through? Are they jokey, funny? Are they very serious and dry? What kind of atmosphere do they create with their language? What's the mood or the tone of the story? And is it appropriate for the genre and the actual story that's being told? What kind of style does the author have? Some authors write very simple prose. Some write really elegant or wordy prose. Some write really dense and difficult prose. Some write really clunky, and some have really good flow. So those are important aspects of the language to consider in a review. Another important element to consider is theme. Okay, stories are always communicating messages and ideas. What are the basic themes of this story? Does it do a good job conveying them? Is it successful in accomplishing its mission? All important elements to think about when we're writing our analysis. The analysis is very focused on the technical aspects of writing. Section 3 is personal response. Again, this should definitely be in its own paragraph. Often all of these sections will take up multiple paragraphs. The personal response moves from the analysis to our personal opinions, what we like and dislike. The writer is sharing what they think of the work. And it's important for a good review to have things on both sides. So you want things that you like shared in your review, and you want things that you disliked. Even if it skews one way or the other, there's way more likes than dislikes or vice versa, that's fine. But have at least one of both. Opinions are based on personal preferences. Everyone has different preferences and different tastes, but you should connect your preferences to the analysis. So, for example, if your story is a real slow burn and you talked about the pacing of the plot, very, very slow, and that's something you didn't like about the book because you found it boring, make sure you don't just say, I thought the story was boring. Talk about the slow pacing of the story. Now you're tying your personal preference to the technique, right? That's not my style or my thing, but other people might like it. Some people really like a slow build that has a very long, drawn-out, suspenseful build-up to an exciting climax at the end. Sometimes at the end of the personal response, reviews will make recommendations about whether or not people should bother reading the book, or they might make some real comparisons to other similar books. If you've read these books, you'll definitely like this one. Or if you read this book and enjoy it, you might want to check out these other ones, that kind of thing. So we've been talking about book reviews for fictional pieces, which is a very common format. You can write reviews for nonfiction books as well. It focuses on a little bit of a different aspect of writing, but the format is still the same. So you're still going to include a summary. You're just going to focus on the main pieces of information instead of the main plot points. Okay, so what is the topic of this book, and what are the main points that it makes about that topic? Your analysis is going to break down how effective it is in conveying that information, the quality of that information, and in your personal response, you're going to share your interest level in the book and in the topic, but also you're going to think about the usefulness of the information. Is it good information? Will people want to read this or take something of value from it? So same format, but really thinking about information in nonfiction as opposed to plot. Of course, we don't have to write reviews just about books. We can write reviews about all sorts of things. People can write reviews about poetry, which is very different than fiction or nonfiction, and really focuses on technique. There's a lot of technique in poetry. People often write reviews of films or television shows, very similar to a book review because these are usually stories as well. And so you're still thinking about all the same components, such as plot and characters. The only difference is that we have a few more things going on with film where you want to think about the aspects such as score, the music in a film, or the acting or the directing, all the other skills that go into the storytelling. People often write reviews about food and restaurants, and sometimes they write reviews about other experiences. So reviews can be about anything that we experience and enjoy in this life. But they tend to follow this same format. We need to remember the acronym SAP, a summary of what actually happened, an analysis of how well it was done, and then our personal response, what we think about what happened.